has been rated T for totally thrilling.
The story of how the Paramount Parks were created is a story of a chain of events of corporate greed, conglomeration, and just a simple case of biting off more than you can chew that led up to the rise and downfall of Paramount Parks. These parks were beloved by many and passed around by a multitude of companies that didn't appreciate them to give them the proper long-term home that they deserved. This is the story of how a few corporate splits and shuffles that led to the downfall of a really great concept during the perfect time and ultimately birthed the creation of a few great coasters. Before the formation of what would become iHeartMedia, there was a company named Taft Broadcasting, a media conglomerate based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Taft Broadcasting, among many other things, was the parent company of Hanna-Barbera. You know, Hanna-Barbera, the same creators of Scooby-Doo, the Smurfs, and the Flintstones. But Taft Broadcasting acquired Hanna-Barbera and owned the company during the mid-60s to the early 90s. But with the massive rise of amusement and theme parks in the 1970s from the likes of SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, Six Flags, and Walt Disney World, amongst many others, Taft saw the potential and growth in the theme park market and sought the opportunity to get in on the growing market while expanding their brand.
Of course, we used Hanna-Barbera as the springboard basically for our amusement park operations, which became a very big part of our business.
Fortunately enough for them, Coney Island, not the iconic park located in New York, but Coney Island along the riverbanks of the Ohio River in Cincinnati, which aimed to be deemed as the Coney Island of the West, faced frequent flooding issues. With these issues that caused a financial strain on the park owners, they aimed to expand away from the Ohio River and move to a larger location.
In the case of Coney Island, the park existed before, and I guess it was on the river, and that's one of the reasons it was moved to Kings Mills?
Yes, because it flooded every spring.
Ooh.
That was not only a nuisance, but expensive and time-consuming. So they really were anxious to move. And of course, the Walks family, who were the operators, very much wanted to build a major theme park, and we gave them that opportunity.
In comes Taft Broadcasting, who would purchase Coney Island, Ohio in 1969 from the park owners who figured the best option to expand would be through selling the park to Taft. Coney Island, Ohio would be relocated to reach a larger audience 25 miles north of Cincinnati to Mason, Ohio.
You also mentioned before we began that you had had a meeting with Roy Disney about theme parks.
This is one of the most amazing stories in my career. Walt, of course, passed away then, and he said, I can. So he set up this meeting with Roy. I figured I'd get about a half an hour. I was with him for over 3 hours. And I think he really enjoyed my reaching out to him to find out how we ought to get into the amusement park business. And so we had a delightful visit. And as I was leaving, I said, Mr. Disney, I certainly thank you for your help. Have I left out anything? And he kind of laughed and he said, you know, it's funny that you'd be here talking to me about amusement parks because you have the finest small amusement park in the United States in Cincinnati, Coney Island.
Uh-huh.
This is the Coney Island in Cincinnati, not New York. He said, what you should do, he didn't say it in a dictatorial way, just a helpful way. He said, what you should do is you should buy Coney Island in Cincinnati and use that as a springboard, the management and so forth, to get into the amusement park business.
With the purchase of Coney Island, Ohio, and the success of key figures and characters at parks such as Mickey Mouse at Disney and Shamu at SeaWorld, Taft Broadcasting saw that this was a great opportunity to venture into the growing theme park industry, and with their recent acquisition of Hanna-Barbera, to also showcase their lineup of cartoon characters at a theme park. In 1972, Taft Broadcasting would reopen the relocated Coney Island, Ohio in Mason, Ohio, and rename it to what would famously be known as Kings Island. A year later in 1973, Carowinds, the theme park located on the border of North Carolina and South Carolina, would open to the public with originally a larger plan in mind for a theme park across 2 states, a shopping center, hotels, a golf course, and an NFL stadium. But after staggering issues and debt, the park would be sold to Taft Broadcasting in 1975. After the success of Kings Island, Taft Broadcasting would expand their park portfolio into a new region. In 1975, Taft Broadcasting would open Kings Dominion in Virginia, to be modeled to mirror their sister Kings Park, Kings Island, with similar rides and park layout. 4 years later in 1979, Taft Broadcasting would open the tallest, fastest, and longest wooden roller coaster in the world at Kings Island, with the Beast. After riding high on the success of the Beast, Kings Island doing very well as a whole, and the creation of Carowinds and Kings Dominion, Taft Broadcasting would expand even further to a whole new country, creating their 4th and final Taft Broadcasting park in Canada's Wonderland, making it the first major theme park and largest in the country. But with all this success and expansion, funds were being pushed to the parks along with the shift of focus. Therefore, Taft Broadcasting felt it was important and needed to go back to the basics, to solely focus on just broadcasting. Taft Broadcasting would end up selling their parks in 1984 to their amusement park group, Kings Entertainment Company, who would separate from Taft, making Kings Entertainment their own independent company. Alongside of this sale, this would mean that Kings Entertainment Company would acquire Kings Island, Carowinds, Kings Dominion, and Canada's Wonderland, while Taft Broadcasting would retain a 1/3 interest in the park. Kings Entertainment Company a year later in 1985 would go on to managing Great America Amusement Park in California after the city of Santa Clara acquired the park from Marriott and approached Kings Entertainment to manage it. In 1985, the city of Santa Clara sold the park to Kings Entertainment but kept ownership of the land that the park sat on. Kings Entertainment Company now owned and operated 5 theme parks across 2 countries. It wouldn't be too long for park ownership to transition again. In 1992, Kings Entertainment Company would be purchased by Paramount Communications, formerly known as Golf and Western, renaming Kings Entertainment Company to Paramount Parks, as they would be the amusement park division of Paramount Communications. With this acquisition, the 5 acquired parks would be renamed with the prefix Paramount branding in front of the parks' names to reflect new ownership. Kings Island, now Paramount's Kings Island. Kings Dominion, now Paramount's Kings Dominion. Carowinds, now Paramount's Carowinds. Canada's Wonderland would become Paramount Canada's Wonderland. Therefore, Marriott's Great America to just Great America, owned by the city of Santa Clara, to now Paramount's Great America.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry.
And now, on with the show.
How do you make fun more fun? The answer's at Paramount's Kings Island. It's everything you've come to expect, plus a real thriller from Hollywood. Top Gun, the roller coaster, only at Paramount's Kings Island, where the magic of the movies meets the thrills of a lifetime.
As far as new additions for the oldest park amongst the 5, Kings Island, 2 coasters would come from under the reign of Paramount Communications, that being an E&F Myler family coaster named Scooby Zoom in 1992, and Paramount's first piece of IP branding of a new major coaster with an arrow suspended coaster in 1993 named Top Gun, after the 1986 film with the same name. Yet again, Kings Island and its 4 other counterparts would see another transition of park ownership. In 1994, Viacom would acquire 50.1% of Paramount Communications, making them the majority owner. But this acquisition would prove beneficial for all of the parks, that would take them to another stratosphere of success, investment of rides, improvements, and attendance. Paramount under Viacom, having major successful blockbuster IPs under them, saw the vision and rise of popularity of the movie-based theme park business, following the likes of Universal Studios Hollywood, the newly opened Disney MGM Studios, and Universal Studios Florida, with the idea in mind to ride the movies. With the new concept in mind, Paramount became paramount in the growth of Kings Island, with them dropping millions of dollars into the park. 6 new coasters to please all walks of life would come to the park. In 1993, aforementioned, Kings Island's second ever aero suspended coaster would come to the park themed after Top Gun. The first premier LIM launch coaster called the Outer Limits Flight of Fear, themed after the sci-fi TV series, The Outer Limits. A Creepo Bat Flyer named Scooby's Ghost Coaster themed after Scooby-Doo. An inverted Vekoma coaster named Face Off, themed after the 1997 film Face Off, that terrified me as a kid. The tallest coaster at the time in park history at 218 feet, an RCCA wooden coaster named Son of Beast, and a second premier LIM launch coaster named Italian Job Stunt Track, themed after the film, The Italian Job. To say so the least, with the theming and epic additions that were added to Kings Island over a decade, this brought popularity, recognition, and a huge attendance spike to the park.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy 2000!
We're now entering a new millennium. In the year 2000, a new theme park in Spain named Terra Mítica would open to the public. A year later in 2001, Paramount Parks would be asked to manage the theme park. Paramount Parks would rebrand this new theme park as a Paramount Park, making it Terra Mítica, a Paramount Park, and making it Paramount Park's newest owned or managed theme park across 3 countries and 2 continents. But in 2004, Terra Mítica, the theme park that the Paramount Parks managed, the park ended up filing bankruptcy to protect themselves from their creditors just 4 years after the park opened and 3 years of Paramount managing the park. After the park filed bankruptcy, Terra Mítica would no longer be a Paramount Park and would become a positive profiting company 2 years later in 2006 as a fully independent company after they restructured their expenses and selling part of unused land on their property. After such an impactful decade plus of new coasters, attractions, and additions to the parks, the Paramount Parks yet again would face another major change as Viacom would go through a massive corporate split. In 2005, Viacom would split in half to form 2 separate major companies. Half of the company would split and continue under the Viacom name. The other half would split to become the CBS Corporation. The Paramount Parks division would be assigned to the CBS Corporation. Unfortunately enough for the Paramount Parks, the CBS Corporation sought to get rid of unnecessary assets, therefore, they sought to sell off the parks. They planned to continue to operate the parks though as normal until they found a buyer. Cedar Fair would buy the parks with a cash purchase of $1.24 billion on June 30th, 2006, ending the reign of what had become the Paramount Parks division and taking over ownership of the parks. Upon the Cedar Fair purchase of the Paramount Parks, there was a 10-year license for the parks to use the Paramount name and branding. Unfortunately enough, there would be quite the setback for the new ownership of Cedar Fair from Kings Island. 9 days later, after the purchase of the Paramount Parks was finalized, on June 9, 2006, within the Rose Bowl section of the ride on Son of Beast, there was a failure in the structure that caused a dip in the track, making one portion of the track uneven from the next portion, creating what would essentially feel like a major pothole. As riders throughout this day kept riding on this coaster, passing over the failing structure, it got worse and worse till eventually one train of passengers would ride over that portion of track and become severely jolted unexpectedly at a top speed of 78 miles per hour, causing 27 injuries and having to report to the hospital. Fortunately, none of a life-threatening degree, but 5 lawsuits were filed against Kings Island and settled in and out of court. Cedar Fair chose to let the 2006 season finish out under the Paramount branding, then chose to opt out of the 10-year licensing deal and remove any trace of Paramount branding in all of their intellectual properties by 2008. As the early 2000s would come to an end, Cedar Fair with their recently acquired park additions would find themselves at a crossroads from the past and would provide the new acquisitions a safe haven, as they would feel welcomed and finally a part of a family. Going back to the original 4 Taft Broadcasting parks, Canada's Wonderland in 2008 would receive the gift of a 230-foot major B&M hypercoaster named Behemoth to enhance the park experience. Carowinds would get a 232-foot B&M hypercoaster of their own named Intimidator. And in 2010, King's Dominion would get one of the best ride experiences out there in a 305-foot Giga coaster named Intimidator 305 that we'll be discussing in a future documentary. But as far as Kings Island, smack dab in the middle of what those 3 other original Taft Broadcasting parks would be gifted and receive, what would come in 2009 would change the park's dynamic forever. As the park would close the door on one chapter with Son of Beast, a new one would begin.
All right, ready? Count down. 1, 2, 3. Diamondback is definitely going to be a spectacular ride, no question about it.